I'm Stan Wollman of the new Plimmoth Gard. I'm here at the Harlow house today, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the military arts of the 17th century soldier. Now, I'm often asked about, was armor in Plymouth? And the answer is yes. The people that came over on the Mayflower did come over with armor. Even though they're not professional soldiers, they did have the equipment to stand guard and to defend themselves. So this is a suit of armor, or a set of armor. It's actually what's called a pikeman's armor. And I'm going to start explaining the pieces here. This, of course, is a helmet, and the style of this is called a morion. This is a very common 17th century European infantry helmet. Some people think that it's the conquistador's helmet, and that is not the case. This helmet was actually first formed in England. It's called a morion. And there are different styles and different shapes, and as it evolves a little, but it's still a helmet with a wide brim and a crown. This crown is to deflect or break off a sword strike. But it's definitely not restricted to the Spanish. It's a morion. We have a gorget, which is a protection for one's neck. It's worn on top of the armor. And as I'll demonstrate. I won't try to put this on today because it's hard to get on and then not choke yourself. And this again is the main body armor. There is a back plate, there's a breastplate, and two leg protectors, one for each side, called tassets. And the tassets are hinged so that you can walk. So let me attempt to don this armor.
My name is Joe Pereira, and I am a member of the new Plimmoth Gard, a reenacting unit of the 17th century settlement here in Plymouth. People often ask us, as we are appearing someplace, are those real swords? Usually they're small kids that are asking, and yes, indeed they are. And they are all replicas of the types of swords that would have been carried here and in Europe, of course, during the 17th century. The most common type that we can show, and here are three examples of what is called a mortuary sword. These were definitely a military man's sword. The simplest one here in my left hand would be called a Tower mortuary sword. They were actually pounded out by British armories, including the Tower of London Armory, and just handed out to soldiers. It's the roughest finish of any of these, and a very business-like blade. The blade itself is thick. It is fullered. Those are the cuts that are in the blade. Sometimes they're called blood gutters, and that's somewhat inaccurate. The fullering was done on the blade actually to lighten it so that it handled a little bit better. This is what's called a cut and thrust weapon. So you've got a sharpened point on it, and in this case, one sharpened edge that could be used against an enemy. Swords were more than just a piece of military apparatus. A gentleman, especially in a city, would not walk out without wearing a sword. And the sword that he carried would mark his station in life. So they were an accessory, and they were also, because they were expensive, the more money you had, the finer sword you could have. This is also a mortuary sword a little bit later, and you see it's a much thinner blade than the one we looked at, much more rapier-like, handles very quickly, also still a cut and thrust weapon with two sharpened edges on it. And then this, which is now finer, this happens to be our captain's sword. So you're seeing much more detail. You've got this beautiful fish skin grip with wire wrapping on it. You notice that the bows are much bigger, much more protection, which is typical of an early sword. This really carries the marks of a backsword, much like a broadsword. This entire guard in and of itself is a weapon that can be used up close also for fighting. It serves a pugilistic purpose. As time went on, these guards became smaller. The guards became smaller because those who were actually fighting with sword became much more proficient at their fighting with a sword. You see that these are all fairly utilitarian, not pretty like the types of swords that we see from, for example, we always think of the rapiers from the Three Musketeers, the swept hilt rapiers, which are actually kind of difficult to handle unless you're really expert. The three swords that I've shown you thus far are English in origin. This one is German, actually a little bit earlier. Teutonic in its beauty and what it does. Also a double edge, cut and thrust. Very heavy guard to take blows from another sword. Beautiful pommel for laying a blow into an enemy's head. And again, your hand is extremely well protected while using the sword. And actually this one is quite well balanced so that you can actually get a great deal of swing and velocity on this and a great deal of control. And that's the important thing. Our pikemen would carry a sword. Our musketmen would carry a sword. Our officers would certainly carry a sword. There were fancier ones here that still exist. Obviously, they belonged to men of a bit more status in the community. But yes, they were real. Yes, swords were used here in the colonies from 1620 onward. The tradition of using fighting swords continued in the United States well through the 19th century, although the styles kept changing more and more. So don't ask, they're real swords. Thank you very much for your time.
Good afternoon, I'm Steve Mattern. I'm captain of the New Plymouth Gard Reenactor Group. Today we're going to show you the operation of a matchlock musket. What is a matchlock musket? Matchlock musket, as its ignition source, uses a piece of burning cord. This is hemp rope that's been soaked in saltpeter, and when we touch the hot coal on the end of this rope to powder, it burns. Powder in the pan burns, lights up the powder in the barrel, and bang, off goes the musket. So let's walk through the manual of arms, first written by Jacob de Geyen in 1607 in Holland, and almost certainly used by Captain Miles Standish with his militia. So we'll walk through the manual of arms. First, we unshoulder our piece, poise it to separate out the musketeers. We take up the piece. Notice the match cord is safely away from the powder. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to charge our pan. So I will take one of my charging bottles and put some powder into the pan. Then we'll close the pan cover. We'll blow off the loose powder. Next step would be to charge with powder into the barrel for the charge, and then to insert a musket ball. We are not going to use powder or a musket ball today. So although our pan will flash, we will not have any explosion when we fire this. So now we've got after the powder and wadding and ball are in, then we take our scouring stick and we tamp everything down. Replace the stick. Now, back to position. Take up our musket. Take up the match in your right hand. Blow the match. Fix it to the serpentine, which, if you can see close up, looks like a serpent's head. Now, we're going to cover our pan. Going to blow on the coal. Little last minute adjustment there. Blow on the coal, and then from there, present, give fire. Again, our pan flashed, but the musket didn't explode. So now you know where the expression flash in the pan comes from. Thank you for watching our demonstration today.